التوحيد من حيث التقسيم.
Tawheed, as defined by the scholars of the people of the Sunnah, is divided into three categories. However, in the classical inductive methodology of the people of the Sunnah, it was initially divided into two main categories: Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, the oneness of God in Lordship, and Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, the oneness of God in Divinity. The oneness of God in Lordship. This was traditionally referred to as the Tawheed of knowledge, recognition, and affirmation, because it pertains to theoretical matters. For instance, knowing that Allah is one, knowing that He is the sustainer, the owner, and the benefactor, all of this falls under the oneness of God in Lordship. This category is not associated with actions from a practical perspective, but is instead connected to inner actions of the heart, such as belief, recognition, knowledge, affirmation, and attribution. The second category pertains to intent and seeking, which is referred to as Tawheed al-Qasd wa al-Talab, the Tawheed of intent and request. It is about what you aim for, direct yourself toward, and seek, essentially, your actions. The oneness of God in Lordship, or the Tawheed of knowledge, recognition, and affirmation, addresses the actions of Allah, the Almighty, the actions of the Creator, such as provision, who provides sustenance, Allah, creation, who creates, Allah, ownership, who possesses ultimate, complete ownership, Allah, the disposer of affairs, the giver of reward, the punisher, the honorer, the humiliator, the giver of life, the causer of death. All of these are actions performed by Allah, the Exalted. As for Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, the oneness of God in Divinity, it does not pertain to Allah's actions, but rather to the actions of the servant. You, as the servant, turn to Allah in your supplication and requests. Who calls upon Allah? The servant. Who seeks help and refuge? The servant. Who performs prayer and fasting? The servant. These actions are performed by the servant. Thus, the actions of the Creator are directed toward His servants, while the actions of the servant are directed toward the Creator, the Almighty. Therefore, the distinction between the oneness of God in Lordship and the oneness of God in Divinity is exceedingly clear, and the evidence for this is abundant. This categorization is not explicitly mentioned in the Quran or Sunnah. Rather, it is an inductive classification. Scholars of the people of the Sunnah analyzed the texts and found that the verses of Tawheed can be divided into two categories: actions performed by Allah. In this category, the servant's role is to have knowledge, recognition, faith, and attribute these actions to Allah alone, without associating any of these acts with others besides Him. How do we affirm Tawheed in Rububiyyah, Lordship? By believing that these actions are performed exclusively by Allah. If one believes that anyone other than Allah can perform actions similar to Allah's, they have committed shirk in Rububiyyah. Likewise, if one believes that someone assists Allah in performing any of these actions, they have fallen into shirk in Rububiyyah. These actions are exclusively Allah's, and no one else performs them alongside Him, nor does anyone assist Him in carrying them out. Whoever believes that anyone other than Allah can perform actions like His is a polytheist. Thus, we now understand Tawheed in Rububiyyah and what opposes it, shirk. When scholars examined these texts, they found that their performer is Allah, and what is required of the servant regarding them is to have knowledge of them, affirm them, and recognize them. This is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. They then examined another category and found that the actual performer of the actions is the servant. Who prays and fasts? The servant. Who prostrates and supplicates? The servant. These actions are performed by the servant for Allah, the Almighty. If the servant performs them for anyone other than Allah, they have fallen into shirk in Uluhiyyah. These actions are performed by the servant while believing that no one other than Allah deserves them. If a person believes that anyone other than Allah is deserving of any of these actions, they have committed shirk, even if they do not perform those actions. For example, if a person does not prostrate to anyone other than Allah, but believes that someone other than Allah deserves prostration, they are a polytheist. Similarly, if someone supplicates to Allah, but believes that someone other than Allah can answer prayers in the same way Allah does, they are also a polytheist. Even if they do not actually supplicate to anyone other than Allah, merely believing that someone other than Allah deserves any of these actions constitutes shirk in Uluhiyyah. For instance, if someone believes that Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, al-Sayyid al-Badawi, or any other person deserves for people to circumambulate their grave, they are a polytheist, even if they do not actually perform the act of circumambulating. Likewise, if someone believes that anyone other than Allah deserves to be supplicated to or to be called upon for help, they are a polytheist. This is because the actions of Rububiyyah are purely the acts of Allah. No one other than Allah performs these acts, nor does anyone assist him in them. As for the actions of servitude, Ubudiyyah, only Allah is deserving of them. It is impermissible to associate anyone else in these acts, as no one other than Allah is entitled to them.